Well, the European Union is demanding answers over the millions of undelivered doses of the coronavirus vaccine that it ordered. The chief executive of drug maker AstraZeneca said the EU's late decision to sign a contract to supply the vaccine meant that there were still glitches to be smoothed out in its production process. But all 27 EU countries are facing heat for a slow rollout. And politicians are asking whether vaccines produced within the EU are going to hire bidders outside the bloc.
Talks and more talks have done little to lessen the EU's anger at AstraZeneca. European officials say the firm has failed to adequately explain why it was slashing its vaccine deliveries to the EU.
Europe invested billions to help develop the world's first COVID-19 vaccines, to create a truly global common good. And now the companies must deliver. They must honor their obligations.
AstraZeneca's delivery cuts are the latest setback to EU plans to vaccinate 70% of adults by summer. Earlier this month, Pfizer said it would temporarily reduce its deliveries to the EU as well, citing production issues. But UK health officials say they expect to have enough supply to meet the country's vaccination targets. That reality is fueling tensions.
I think the thing to do now is not to, go down the sort of the dead end of vaccine nationalism. It's to work together to make sure that we protect our people. That's my priority, is to protect the British people, to protect the United Kingdom, but also to protect the whole world, because no one is safe until we're all safe.
But divisions over how to fairly distribute vaccines will likely persist in the near term. South Africa's president lashed out at wealthy countries, accusing them of buying up the global vaccine supply.
Now, rich countries in the world are holding on to these vaccines, and we are saying release the excess vaccines that you have ordered and hoarded.
South Africa still needs to secure 14 million more doses to accomplish its vaccination goals. By contrast, the EU, UK, and the US have signed contracts with drug makers to acquire more than 200 times that amount.
All right, Europe's supply shock. To talk about that, I'm joined tonight by Rachel Silverman. She's a policy fellow at the Center for Global Development. She specializes in global health policy. Rachel, it's good to see you again. I remember last November, you calculated that the world's wealthy countries had snapped up almost all of the BioNTech Pfizer vaccine. That was the first vaccine that was approved. What's the picture like now in terms of vaccine access for the world's poorest countries?
So it's a much better picture. I should say also it's great to be back. It's a much better picture, but it is a complicated picture still. So the first big thing that's happened is we have additional vaccine candidates that have shown themselves to be highly effective in late-stage clinical trials. So we also have the Moderna vaccine and, of course, the AstraZeneca vaccine. And that's expanded the overall supply of vaccine in the system. There are also the vaccines coming out of China and Russia that, although, in my opinion, do not have sufficiently transparent shared data, are being taken up by some low and middle income countries, even already today. And what we're seeing is there still are not having vaccines reach these countries in the quantities we would like to see and the speed that we're seeing in rich countries. But we are starting to see COVAX, which is an international NGO charity effort to ensure equitable access to these vaccines. We see that they are talking about scheduling some of these deliveries for this first round of vaccines in Q1. So things are improving, but they're not where we want them to be quite yet.
Yeah, and we've got the European Union saying that it's not receiving what it paid for and what it ordered. At the same time, you've got South Africa's president today accusing wealthy countries of hoarding the vaccine for their own citizens. I mean, what do you think? What's the truth here?
The truth is it's complicated. Fundamentally, the truth is there's just not enough vaccine supply to go around to everyone right now. And so what we're seeing is no country actually has excess right now. Everyone is struggling to get enough supply to vaccinate their citizens and is trying to keep up with demand. However, what is true, and I think what President Ramaphosa was referring to, is the fact that rich countries have pre-ordered much more than they will need in aggregate. So by the end of this year, assuming supply projections happen as expected, many wealthy countries will have much more than they need, while poorer countries probably still will be struggling to meet the needs of their populations. So what I'd love to see is some commitments to vaccinate, to donate the excess vaccinations once countries know that they have enough to vaccinate their own populations. And what Norway is doing actually is donating some doses in parallel to their own vaccination efforts.
Well, what about these cheaper vaccines that are coming online now? I'm thinking of AstraZeneca. I'm also thinking about the one from Johnson & Johnson. Shouldn't they help solve the problem for poorer countries?
Absolutely. So every new vaccine that comes online, especially these ones with lower price points, are enormously helpful at solving these overall issues. AstraZeneca, we have pretty large international production capacity, including through the Serum Institute in India, which is producing this vaccine en masse. J&J, we still don't have efficacy readout for that vaccine, but if it comes online, that will be great news, in large part because it only requires one dose, which is tremendously helpful from a logistical perspective. So the more vaccines we get online, the closer we get to solving this problem and relieving the overall supply constraints that we're all feeling in Europe, in the US, and in poorer countries.
Rachel Silverman with the Center for Global Development. Rachel, we appreciate your time and your insights tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's get a look now at some other developments in the pandemic. The number of COVID cases worldwide has now surpassed 100 million. That's according to Johns Hopkins University. The COVAX vaccine sharing platform says it hopes to supply 1.8 billion doses to poorer countries this year. Peru's President Francisco Sagasti has ordered the total lockdown of the capital Lima and 9 other regions following a surge in new cases there. And a Chinese woman has been sentenced to 1 year in prison for hiding her virus symptoms before boarding a flight from the U.S. to China last March. She took medication to suppress a fever.